Hello everyone, this is Khaled and I'll be your instructor for this Python course provided by Learning while Practicing. In this video, we'll be talking about functions, so let's get started. We have seen lots of examples of functions before as we have been going over the last few videos in Python. We have seen the first function we have seen is print, so that is a function that takes an argument and then prints whatever inside these parentheses. And we have also seen lots of mathematical functions like ceil, and then it takes a float. We have also seen floor that takes a float as well, and so on. So all of these, the print, ceil, and floor, and all of these are functions. So these are like built-in functions. There are some lines of code that are existing in Python, and they are grouped together so that we can simply call this function and execute these lines of code without needing to write all of this over and over again. So in this video, we'll learn how to define our own functions that we could use in our code. So let's start. So in order to define a function, the first thing that we need to do is to type def, which is a keyword for function definition. And then we have the function name. So let's say that we're defining a function that will calculate the area of some circle. Given its radius, which we have done before, but we'll do this in the form of a function in this video. So let's say this is called calculate area. So this is the name of the function. And then the list of arguments that this function would be operating on. So let's say taken only some variable called radius. So this is the name of the variable. Okay. And then we can say that area, this is also another variable, is equal to pi multiplied by our radius and 2. Of course, in order to use these functions, in order to use pi, let's import from math, import everything. Okay. So now we have calculated the area. And then in order to return this value to the main program or to our code, which is using this function, we use some keyword called return. So it returns whatever we want to return from a function to the parent function or to the code which called this function. So here we're just gonna return area, and that's it. Of course, if we run this, we wouldn't find any output here. We didn't do any printing. We didn't even call that function. So let's first call that function. In order to call that function, we can use it from like the original indentation here. Let's say here we're gonna have some radius for r equals 2, and then we want to calculate the area of r. So as we can see here, calculate area is a function that we have written. It takes radius as an argument. These two variables doesn't have to match in name, but they have to match in the type and in the number. I mean, the number of arguments have to match between the two functions, between calling the function and the original function definition. So here what we're doing here is called calling the function. So that is using the function or calling the function that we have implemented before. Okay, let's run this. Okay, this code executes, but it's not printed anything. So what we can do here is that we can say that x equals calculate area. So x here would store this value, the return value for this function, the value area. So this is most likely would be a float number because this function returns a float. So this whole calculation would be a float. So this would be a float number. So we can simply capture this value returned back from a function by using some variable in the main code. And in this code, we call this variable x, and it is just storing the value returned by this function. So then we can print x. So x here would be the area calculated for this specific radius of 2. Okay, so let's try this out. Let's print, and here we go. It actually calculated the area and printed the value returned by the calculate area function. Of course, we can change r, or let's say we have another variable. Let's say it's u. Let's give it the value of 5, and then say j is calculate area u, and then print j, run, and we got the other calculation as well. So this is the basic idea of a function. So some code or some statements grouped together, defined once in the code, and then we can use it multiple times. So it highly affects the code reuse in our source base. So it is really important to implement functions within our code as much as we could in order to use code and not write lots of lines in our code. Okay, let's try another function. Let's say that we have seen the function len before. So if we have len, the string, it returns the number of characters within that string. Okay, so let's run that. So there are 11 characters here. So let's implement our version from len. Let's see how can we implement len. So in order to do this, let's also define our function. Let's call it custom len, and then it takes some string. Let's call it s. The name doesn't matter. So how are we going to calculate the number of characters or the length of this string? So what we can do is we employ our previous knowledge from the previous video about loops. If you haven't watched it, please go over it again. So we can go over each character in the string. So in order to do this using for loops, we can say for, and let's define the variable that represents the current character. Let's say it's ch, then n s. So instead of using range as we did before, we're using s, which is the whole string. So here what this line says is that do this for each character in that string. So what are we going to do? We can increment some count. So count equals count plus 1, and then we need, of course, to define count first and initialize it to 0. And then finally we return count. Okay, also, by the way, we could do this increment using a different way. In Python, we can just say count plus equals 1, which is exactly the same as incrementing the count by 1. And yeah, and then we can return the count. Of course, you need to make sure that you're using the correct indentation. So this return should be on the outside level of this function, and that would be our function. Okay, so let's test our custom len function. So let's feed it some string. Let's say this string is hello world. We know already it's consisting of 11 function, that is 11 characters. That is what the original len function told us. So we can apply this custom len of s. Of course, we don't need to have s. Let's say that simple string, any name would do. They don't have to match. And let's store this in some variable called y. And then let's print y. Okay, let's run this code. And again, we see that actually this function prints correctly the number of characters within our code, within our string. So here we go. We built our custom len function. So that would be it for today. I hope that you could see that functions are a very powerful concept, and hopefully see you next video.